Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
I'd like to call the finance committee meeting to order on Tuesday, December 10th,
Wow.
2024 at 3 p.m. Heidi, could you please take roll call? Berto? Here. Hausen? Here. Bell?
Here.
Is there a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
So moved.
Motion by Bell. Second by Hausen. All in favor? Aye. Carried. Is there a motion to approve the meeting minutes from September 23rd, 2024 as presented?
Make that motion.
Motion by Bell. Second by Hausen. All in favor? Aye. Carried. Comments, correspondence, and concerns from the public. Before we get to that agenda item, when we get to the finalized tax rate discussion, which is next, I would like Adam to make a presentation to all of us. I would like him to take questions from the board. And when that conversation is over, I will open it up to anybody who may have other questions or comments. So you will have that opportunity. So under comments, correspondence, and concerns from the public, if there's something not pertaining to the current tax rate, please bring that up now. Otherwise, you will have the opportunity later. And thank you all for coming. So does somebody wish to talk about anything else?
I would,
Yes.
Mike Glasswood, Mr. Bay, 10873 North Bay Shore. In the meeting from the last finance committee, one of the notes that I saw in the report from the administrator is that in light of this discussion, there's a line here that said mid-year actuals will remove from the budget and replaced with overall 2024 projections for ease of comprehending revenues and expenses. It says the resulting fund balance as expenses are expected to exceed revenues in 2025. So it looks like our administrator is already telling us that our spending next year is going to be greater than our revenue in 2025. So it looks like you're increasing the reserve to cover that. I may not understand it correctly, but that's an issue on top of the existing concerns we have about our property taxes and both of us are here to discuss today.
The board was well aware that we were using a little bit of money to balance the budget out of our undesignated balance fund. Anyone else? Okay. Finalized tax rate discussion. Adam.
Okay. So what I put together for you guys is a presentation that kind of walks
You're
through.
gonna have to speak up. We're using microphone.
Oh, I'm sorry, I got a little bit of a cold. Normally my voice carries, so can you guys hear me better? Okay.
That's better.
All right, so what I put together is essentially kind of an agenda and a PowerPoint presentation that walks through kind of three areas. One, it's going to talk about the overview of the finalized tax rate. Number two then is going to go into kind of some recommended process improvements that potentially could be enacted by not only the finance committee, the board and the staff to look at, how you can avoid this in the future with certain goals. And then really that the finalization of it is kind of next steps and items for consideration to kind of think about, okay, if there's certain things that you want to do, what are some options and alternatives to kind of meet that process. So Barrett again was contracted on June 19, 2024 to assist with the evaluation and development of the annual 5-year CIP and the development of the proposed annual budget. The CIP was updated utilizing a budget template created by Barrett, which was done in prior years. And Barrett staff assisted the finance director and the village administrator with the annual budget process and creation, utilizing the workbooks and templates that have been utilized over the last 7 years. Barrett and staff followed historic processes and templates to better understand how the budget was created and finalized in the past. So we did not make any changes to how the previous budget was done. We essentially wanted to see, with Vlad being new, with me essentially coming here in June, and with Julie being more involved in the overall process, we wanted to see from start to finish what had been done. How do you submit things? What are they due? What are the timelines? So Vlad obviously had kind of the process and could understand looking at improvements that he would want to make or that Julie wanted to make, or what I have seen in other municipalities that I've been in as an administrator or assisted with. So the current workbook and templates are focused on establishing the operating mill rate, which includes the tax levies for the general fund, debt service, and capital improvement fund, or known as the TID-out property tax levy. In working with staff and attending the various finance committee and village board meetings, the goal and discussion for the 2025 budget was to keep the mill rate for the operational budget flat. So if you go to the next page, using the template, that is what staff and I worked on with them on, was essentially using the templates that they had to look at in 2024. You had a $3.3 million levy with an assessed value of $795 million. That equated to an operational mill rate of $4.23 when you account for the $100,000, multiplication. In 2025, then what we did was we had a $3.4 million levy with the assessed value of $804 million, which then came to the same amount of the $4.23. So that included accounting for the debt service, where I know there were concerns about the debt and how that was being handled, the capital projects, and the overall operation. So that was, I know, staff, that was, I know, the finance committee, and obviously the village board making tremendous cuts and decisions on what to fund in order to basically keep that flat. All right. So Vlad then, as a finalization step in the budget process, reviewed when the tax bills came out and cross-referenced the finalized rate with the adopted budget notice and discovered a discrepancy. It was discovered and verified with Barrett that workbooks have never calculated the additional tax levy needed for tax increment district number 1 and number 2 to establish what is the finalized mill rate, which is called the property tax levy TID-in. This prompted discussions with Vlad and Barrett on the process and options, and obviously why we are here today. The current budget creation process is not uncommon, as other municipalities will focus and have their boards and councils adopt and monitor the operation budget only, as the tax increment districts are a separate part of the tax calculation. So there are other municipalities that do that, where they will only adopt the operational rate and they do not take the TIF into account. And so then the finalized rate is what they have, but can increase due to the tax increment district. So if a board or council wants to focus on the finalized village mill rate, including the TIDs, then additional calculations need to be added to the finalized budget notice and forms for adoption moving forward. So if you go to the next page, what I did was essentially looked at what is on the Department of Revenue's tax increment worksheets. I went back and looked from 2022 to essentially 2025. Now, Vlad actually has gone back the last 7 years and found that this discrepancy has been occurring since 2017. There has been where the rate that was approved was the TID out, and then what was put onto the finalized tax bill was the TID in. So in 2022, there was a difference between $6.06 is what was on the actual budget worksheet that was part of the process approval. The finalized mill rate that went on the tax bills was $6.89. That was a difference of 84. In 2023, it was $6.24. The finalized mill rate was $7.13. That was a difference of 89 cents. Last year, you had the reevaluation occur. So you did see a significant reduction in what was the overall rate. So you set it at $4.24, but then with the finalization of the TIDs and everything else, it came to $4.73. So that was a difference of 49 cents. And then in this budget, we did keep the operational levy flat. So you can see that is at $4.24, just as it was in 2024. But then when you account for the TIF districts and everything else being finalized, it created a finalized mill rate of $5.24. So you can see again from 2022, your tax rate was $6.89, 2023 was $7.13. 2024, it dropped to $4.73, and right now the mill rate is proposed at $5.24. Now, what TIF district number 1 was created in 2008. TIF district number 2 was created in 2018. So it is very possible, we for sure have shown that for the last 7 years, this discrepancy has been occurring. It's possible, and the assumption would be that it potentially has been occurring since the TIF district has been in place, if that has not been shown to you, either the finance committee or potentially the village board. Again, once the TIF districts close, the growth will shift to the general fund and can be utilized to reduce the overall mill rate. So what we have in here are kind of some recommended process improvements that you could consider. One would be to update the budget workbooks to account for the combined operating and tax increment mill rate. If the desire is for the village to keep the combined mill rate flat and not just operations rate, which appears to have been what has been approved in the past, this would be done with the implementation of the 2026 budget. So this is an example of a template that was used when I was in the village of Marshall, Where you can see the difference of what they have from yours is if you look at the bottom, it creates a total tax levy village operations, and then the total TID tax levy to then create the total tax levy, so that that would match basically 1-for-1 what you're seeing as what's being approved versus then what goes on the finalization of the tax bills.
The answer to that question is yes.
Okay.
This is what we want.
Yes. Okay, so if you go to the next page, this is another way that that's been shown. So this is the Village of Harrison who we work with as well. This essentially does very much the same thing. And then you can see in the yellow section of the, kind of graph here, they're calculated that equalized value with TID out, equalized value with TID in, that then comes to the assessed rate, and you can see the differences there. So then you can make the decisions as to if you want to keep it flat, how you want to kind of adjust that, what you want to do. All right, recommended process improvements number 2. So Vlad is the new finance director, has completed a full budget cycle and is aware of the forms, submittals, and timelines to catch issues in the future and to monitor the checks and balances. The forms that I would recommend, and talking with Vlad, that would be incorporated into the budget workbook would be the updated budget notice workbook, a tax increment worksheet, so you can see specifically how that's playing out, and then having in what you have here, these mill rate worksheets. So having the TID in and TID out, so that way you can continually play with those. You're obviously with the TIDs are not going to be able to control the other taxing jurisdictions, but you certainly can review and see what is going on with the village. So even though if you may keep your TID rate flat, it is still the possibility that if the county, the technical college, or the school district increase their levies, it will increase the overall tax rate. So that's just something to keep in mind. This will allow Vlad to monitor the changes in the mill rate and if needed, provide updates to the committee and the board before the final submission to the county for the tax bill creation. Some other things to consider then would be to alter the budgetary timeline schedule to present the draft mill rate impact in October. The budget workshop has done in years past. Target to have a finalized budget hearing with the finalized mill rate impact closer towards the 3rd week in November to account for any changes to the assessed value rate. Do the TID-in finalized mill rate worksheet that normally comes available about the 3rd week in November. And also then your manufacturing numbers are usually finalized around that time as well. And that is another piece of the puzzle that can cause an increase between your rates if you were to adopt your budget in October. You may not have a lot of manufacturing, but it can play into that overall difference in the assessed value, which could increase the mill rate or drop it, depending on where it is. The county has historically had a deadline for the mill rate worksheet to be submitted to them before the week of Thanksgiving to allow for property tax bills to be created by the 1st week of December. So that's why you would try to target that 3rd week of November. And then again, these changes would be for the 2026 budget. Okay, so if the desire is for the 2025 budget to truly fall at the $4.73 combined finalized operating and tax increment rate for 2024, the original estimate provided was a reduction of about $408,000 needed to be reduced from the budget. After finalizing and updating the numbers, the new estimate is a reduction to the operating budget of about $330,241. So what you can see here is essentially what that would do is the TID out levy would go from 3.4 million. It would have to be reduced to about 3,080,000. That would be a reduction from the 424 to essentially $3.83 to then account for the TIF district increase that needs to occur to get you to $4.73. What the next page shows you is essentially what is the impact on the tax bill if it were to stay at the $5.24. So what we've shown is essentially property values ranging from 650,000 to 300,000. And you can see the tax rate at 524 versus the tax rate at 473, the variance that is occurring and essentially the impact per day. So what you can see is from a if we're talking about a $650,000 home, the tax rate for 524 essentially creates the village portion of $3,406. The tax rate of $4.73 would be $3,074. That's a variance of $331.50, or essentially 91 cents a day. And then going down to kind of the bottom, if you had a $300,000 home, the tax rate at $5.24 would create a tax bill of $1,572 for the village portion. If it was at $4.73, it'd be $1,419. That's a variance of $153, or essentially 42 cents per day. So now to walk through what are some of the options that are available or to consider. Option number 1 would be leave the rate as is. It has been calculated and approved as in prior years.
No.
These are just options, right? I have to throw them out there. Option number 2 is leave the rate as is and adopt a new policy moving forward to consider having the finance committee and board authorize increasing budgets going forward to account for. Now, this is where I've, in different places I've been in, whether it was Hobart, Marshall, Platteville, and obviously now working for Barron, there's multiple ways that they do it. Sometimes they will just focus on the levy and say that they will allow every year for the village staff to propose a levy increase that is based on a percentage. It can either be tied to the CPI, it could be something that's decided by the village board. It could be the amount that is allowable in the levy limit worksheet. So that's one way that the budget could be changed to focus on. The other one would be focusing overall on a tax rate increase range. So if there is going to be a tax rate increase, what is that allowable range? This is something that we did in Marshall where they would approve, usually in August, I would try to meet with them, where they would approve a range that would be anywhere from 1 cent to 10 cents. So that way, when we were working through the process and even in completing it, as long as we completed that goal, that then was met. Or going forward would be to change it to actually have the budgetary worksheets complete a approved finalized mill rate. So what you're approving then should be exactly what is matching essentially on the tax bills when they go out. Option 3 would be,
So-
yep,
Can I be
Yeah.
on option 2 for a
Go ahead.
minute? So I thought we do have the policy that we set years ago that staff was to propose a budget with the maximum of a 3% increase, and then committees and finance or whatever would look at that budget and act accordingly to how that 3% increase, what we felt about it and what projects and expenses we had in there. This year, they were told to have a 0%. So we already do
okay.
have that written in our policy, correct, Julie? The 3%.
Yes,
It's
however-
supposed to be the original submittal from staff.
Right, and that 3% or 0%, this year it was 0%, is for that operational budget that we're putting together. What Adam is saying here is have a policy that even after you add those TID numbers,
Sure.
it can only be a certain.
Right.
percent.
Because that's not being taken account for in
Right.
the budget process, right?
But I would think that if we had set that limit, I mean, we can still have that conversation. But if that's what we want the first proposal to be from staff, it would have to be all inclusive.
Is that actually in policy? Because I think that happens at the 3% was set at the first budget meeting of the year, I believe.
It's your budget directive.
So that's comes from that meeting or that comes from policy?
Well, the budget directive is the policy that we have to follow in drafting the budget.
So that we're setting the policy every year.
Yes.
Okay, I thought it was written because I remember when Pat Duffy was on finance and that's where that came out of years ago.
It was probably a policy that was set by the finance committee at that time.
Okay,
Okay.
all right.
So then that would be something then that I would consider
Okay.
putting into kind of a finalized going forward. So option 3, there's been conversations about, okay, could you use unassigned general fund balance to reduce down to the 473? The concern obviously with that is looking at your most recent audit from 2023. The village unassigned general fund balance is at 1,417,845. So generally, as you can see in here, what the bond rating agencies want to see is you to be somewhere between 25 and 40%. So that certainly is something that could be done, but in order to, because in the last, we've talked about in the last 3 years, you have continued to get increases in your bond rating and where you're rating it at, preferably you would not want to touch that if you don't have to. So that option is available, but would be recommended not to do so. Option 4 would be looking, option 4 and option 5 essentially are looking at budgetary amendments that would be done. So what you would be looking at doing in option 4 is a budgetary amendment to reduce the budget to by an estimated 330,241. So the first area that this would look at would be the capital improvement project levy reduction. So there was 1.1 million that essentially was levied on the general operation that is directly related to capital projects. That would be a possibility that either could come from the finance committee and then obviously approved by the village board to reduce some of those projects to essentially account if the goal is to get down to that $4.73. What it would take then would be a amendment where you would then choose which projects you would essentially want to reduce. And then what would happen is you would have a reduction in revenue from the line item that is the levy for the capital projects. You'd have a reduction, obviously, in those projects. And then what you would create is essentially a expenditure in your general fund that then would be a refund back to the taxpayers to cover that $330,000 difference to get down to the $4.73. Option number 5 would be another option to consider, would be a budget amendment then to increase the budget by an estimated $330,241. In talking with staff, one of the things that was not put into the budget was to account for revenue for a possible sale of the current administration building property. So that would be one where then you would obviously add that as a revenue. You then would have an expenditure. I was at the Wisconsin Government Finance Officers Association conference last week, kind of walking through some of these things with the auditors. Amber is the auditor that obviously works with the village. So one of the things, obviously, whatever option you would want to do, it would be a budgetary amendment. I would suggest we obviously get with Amber and kind of talk about, you know, how that impacts, what are the impacts. And then one of the things obviously then is talking about, if you do this, what are the options for the county? Could you have the tax bills rerun? That is something that staff kind of looked into this morning. Vlad has been in conversations with them. You know, if you want to explain it, or do you want me to take it?
Ryan said you can rerun, it's gonna be significant cost, we need to double check with Department of Revenue. So there might not gonna be enough time to do that.
Okay. So that's something where, you know, essentially that, yep,
Did we check with the Department of Revenue? Do we have an answer?
Yeah, I made 2 phone calls and it went straight into voicemail.
Okay, but the county did say that the bills could be resent.
yes,
Forward email to you.
yes.
Heidi also checked into that, and when they reran it for Washington Island a couple years ago, it was about $10,000, so you're looking at least 10,000 to rerun.
Okay.
Plus postage. Which is probably 20 now.
So that would be one of the questions to potentially have with CLA, if there is a direction that comes from the finance committee or the village board to do an amendment, would be to see if that would be something that you could do without having to rerun the bills, and then essentially just have a check that would be cut from the village, obviously then to your taxpayers.
And what do we have, about 1,200 taxpayers in the village? 1,200 checks we'd write?
Well, we probably want to write them to the people that have already paid. And Heidi checked in 16,000, did you say Heidi has been paid already?
Yes.
So 16,000 in taxes has already been paid. So we'd want to look at those that have paid and figure out what their refund is basically, and send, those are the ones that would get the check.
Right, but if we don't
If you don't
rerun
have
run the bills.
If they don't
this
rerun-
committee or the board
Yep.
does not want to rerun the bills, or the Department of Revenue for some reason says no, which I don't know why they would care.
Right.
But
It's
we'll
the
just leave
UR.
it at that. Then our other option is cutting checks, because everything is processed through the county.
Right.
So the county cannot take less than what the current tax bill is, because it would show that a balance was owed.
Yes, and that was one of the responses that Vlad got back from the county, is that for anybody that, you know, they could rerun the tax bills with a cost. But then anybody who is already paid, that then would still be a check cut back from the village to that taxpayer. Or the other option is then the village would collect everything, send this 330,000 to the county, and then the county would essentially then cut them a check. So that is what has led me to assume that then you could essentially do that yourselves.
What a
Yes.
mess.
We do that on January 1st.
I would think it'd be cheaper to do it in those.
Right.
Although we don't have a bulk rate, that part gets expensive.
I really don't understand, for approximately 1,200 tax bills and $10,000 plus bill. I mean, the county mails and does things all the time that I'm not disagreeing if that's what they told you.
Yeah, and I mean, that was the estimate based on what the town of Washington Island had, so, you know.
And the county told you that.
That's
Okay.
the number that was given, yes, so
Okay.
we're still waiting on an official if you were to go through that.
Okay, Okay, I'll let you carry on. Thank you, Adam.
That's actually kind of the last piece of the puzzle there.
Okay, so. I've been on finance forever. And it has never been presented to me that this was an operational budget only. And so I feel horrible that this has happened. And if you're saying that it's happened in other years, maybe it was minuscule that we didn't notice. And last year it was so absorbed because of the reevaluation and everything else that it didn't stand out to us. So I think we want to do going forward, but can you explain that the TID funds
Mhm.
that has to stay, that has to stay in that TID account,
Yes.
not in the general fund. So we can only spend that TID money on what is allowed by law. And that is the crux of it, correct?
It's a separate piece of this puzzle, absolutely. So when you said so if you did not have any TIDs, the way your budget process is set up is correctly creating what is the operational mill rate. And so if you didn't have any TIDs, what would be submitted then is when you look at kind of the sheet, you have the TID in and TID out, you'd only be submitting to the county the TID out. And that is dead on the 424, that was a 0% increase from your operational budget of last year. Part of the equation is then when you have TIF districts, whatever your operational mill rate is that is approved, which is again, what you need to run the day-to-day operations, that's your general government, your capital improvement, your debt. That then goes through the tax increment worksheet to, just as you basically said, to create the tax increment then that needs to be generated to cover projects and growth that you are seeing in your TIF districts. Now, one of the things, just as you alluded to, is what has happened in previous years, is if you look at that variance or that discrepancy, it has sometimes been short, but over the last couple of years, it's getting bigger and bigger. And part of that is due to the success, which is a good thing, of your TIF districts. If you look at what your TIF districts did this year, TID number 1 grew $77 million in increment value. That is awesome for a TIF district. TIF number 2 grew 5.5 million in equalized value. Your equalized value grew by about $80 million, while the majority of that is related to your TIF districts, because that is where most of your growth is occurring from right now, is in your TIFs. So that is playing a little bit into that. But that's also something that I am talking with staff as well in regards to the mill rate worksheet, because I'm also curious why that discrepancy is now continues to get further and further away. Whereas before it was, I think as Vlad has right here, in 2017, it was about 13 cents, it was 17 cents, and then it was 22, 84, 89, 49, and 1. So you can see it's
Right.
it's growing. And that's something that I want to investigate a little further to try to see if there's something in the budgetary worksheets. And that's going to be part of this too, is in updating the worksheets. Right now you have TID tabs in your worksheet, but they're not they're not using, and nothing is being, word I'm looking for. Nothing is being calculated to include that rate that's needed
Right,
to go
there's no
in there.
formula.
There's no formula
that
that's guiding that
page.
forward that then is caused, so that when your staff comes to you
Right,
and presents the budget and says, here's where it actually is, there shouldn't be a discrepancy. You should be able to see that, because then you have to make decisions as a finance committee, as a community to, okay, if we want a 0% increase, then we have to do this to the operational levy. We have to account for the TIDs. And if your TIDs are growing, which is a great thing, the downfall to that is that then will reduce your operational levy. So that's why there are some municipalities that basically just separate it and they only focus on the operational. And then their answer when there is potential increases is, well, that accounts for, this is the operational, that's what we focus on. There may be an increase due to the TIDs or other factors, and that's how that plays into it.
think fundamentally why everybody is here today is because we told everyone out there that we were going to not increase taxes. And then this bill came up.
Right.
So that's fundamentally, if we wouldn't have said that, it's possible this could have kept going on, although the gulf is getting big enough that.
Yeah. I mean, essentially, it's going forward, it's a conversation from staff, from the board as to, you know, you want to make sure your budgetary worksheets are giving you the full picture, so you can understand then what that means. You know, in this
So we can
situation,
talk intellectually.
and then also
Budget.
understand what that means for impacts, where you're talking $330,000. So that's the impact that essentially this is going to take to truly have a 0% increase. Now, is that something, I'm gonna put my former administrator hat on, is that something that's sustainable? No. You know, you can't always have a 0% mill rate because everything changes. You have staff that are gonna change their costs. Understanding the reason, very common after you have a reevaluation, we just had this in Eschwabana, and I can tell you my tax rate skyrocketed. So then there usually is an effort by the boards and by the committees to try to have the next year's impact be as less as possible. Because of the goals of wanting to keep this at a 0%, that's what helped us discover there's something going
So-
on in the sheets.
Amongst this bad situation that we're in and we're addressing it, there is a silver lining that now has
Yes.
come out moving forward.
Is that this has been going on, this is not the first year this has occurred. This has been going on for multiple years. And so now it's an understanding of there are improvements that need to be made in order to truly give you the picture and understanding of those impacts. So that then, yes, there is full transparency where if I'm a taxpayer looking at my tax bill, I go to the sheet that is on, that was approved by the board, it should match. Or at least be relatively within, again, there could be a slight variation between the manufacturing, but it should not be that drastic, so that it's pretty clear cut on what you're approving. And that way you then know what you have to essentially sacrifice as a staff or as a committee or as the village in order to reach whatever that goal is.
So overrides, finalized, so never was discovered and verified, workbooks have never calculated the additional tax levy needed for incremental. So never been done, so I reached out to the Department of Revenue, I spoke with our assessor and I talked to
Mhm.
Bob Coughlin. Bob Coughlin said that the finance director at that time, Juliana, called the state and asked the Department of Revenue what the preliminary value of the TID was. He created the first TID. He knew. They knew. So it wasn't never.
Okay, and that was one of the questions, right?
Right. Number one. I spoke with our assessor. So, and correct me if I'm wrong, you're an administrator. Our assessor submitted the valuations on, it had to submit them on by June 10th of this year. And then the state, Department of Revenue, they then create the preliminary valuations.
Yes, that's usually August 15th.
It was August 2nd.
Yeah.
The final ones are August 15th. So they send out a notice to anyone that signed up for those notices that the preliminary TID valuations are available. That came to Heidi. Heidi received that email, but nobody looked at it.
That's not true, Louise.
Okay, but it came. Somebody,
Yeah.
then if nobody looked at it,
Did we review?
No, we looked at that because that was a part of in the
who
TID,
looked at it?
in the TID workbooks, that's where that information was put in. Yes. So we know what that estimated number was.
But you knew on August 3rd.
No, well, hold on, so we get that number, but we don't know the impact it has on the budget or the tax rate
Right.
until we see all the other tax rates coming in.
Right. But you still saw the number
Well,
and the difference between, let me finish, the difference between, so then I talked to Kristen in the Department of Revenue. And I asked her, well, is there usually a big difference between the preliminary one and the one that comes out on the 15th. The state gives municipalities 10 working days after the one is published on the 3rd
Mhm.
to come back to them with any adjustments that need to be made.
Mhm.
And then the final one is published on the 15th. And I said, are they usually the same? Are they pretty similar? And she said, yes.
Yeah, we didn't have any changes to
Right.
what was in the table.
Right.
Right. But it would seem, and then directed to you, sorry.
Nope.
With the valuations in Sister Bay going up and getting, and the size of our TIDs,
Mhm.
the geographic size of our TIDs, wouldn't it seem that those TIDs it would be logical that they would go up exponential, would it seem that that would be logical to
Mhm.
you? Glad, how much do you know about TIDs?
Before I started, I had no idea.
Okay.
So,
And you're an administrator, you know a lot about TIDs, right?
Mhm.
And you have a lot of experience with TIDs. So I understand it wasn't part of the process or the worksheet.
Mhm.
However, it feels like in some municipalities, it's deliberate not to do this, not to evaluate, not to include it. And that's their prerogative.
Mhm.
What I'm saying is that I think it's a failure to not have taken that into consideration, even though it wasn't part of a worksheet. I truly do, I mean, it took me a day and a half to talk to anybody that I knew that understood this, so they could explain it to me. So from a logic standpoint, am I wrong about this? I'm really trying to be objective, but
Mhm.
when they submitted the valuations in June, Vlad had been with us a minute and a half.
Right.
Then we get the first one in August. He'd been with us about a half hour.
Oh, hold on, Vlad was not
So-
with us to
Mhm.
be fair to Vlad, I think you started in July.
Okay, that he hadn't been with us yet. The point is that in Bob Cufflin's words, TIDs are a really big deal.
Mhm.
He created the first one, he knows. So I get that it wasn't in the worksheet, but just because it wasn't, doesn't mean that it couldn't have been considered.
Well, I think that's what one of Adam's recommendations is moving forward, start looking at those. No, you're not gonna know the impact it's gonna have on your budget back in August. You're not gonna know that until you actually get the numbers from the other taxing
I fully
jurisdictions.
understand that.
But, and we did know, approximately what that value was, because we had discussed that in June, I believe,
Mhm.
when Adam was up here. So, wasn't the final one that was released in August, but you had it from the previous year. And as a matter of fact, that's why we decided not to amend the TID, if you recall,
Right.
because the value was so high in those TIDs. And we had talked about that.
But we didn't take the TIDs into consideration that's the disconnect for me.
And that's why that's why
Because
Adam's
that's never
recommendation
been
was,
done in your budget, right?
moving
I
forward,
guess I'm not understanding why it's not best practices.
As far as to have that in your budget.
Have it considered in an area within
Mhm.
York County and within the state that is experiencing the unbelievable growth in valuations. To me, that is,
well, this is the first year you're seeing that big change, so.
so it's not the first year the valuations have gone up in the village, and these are huge TIDs and they're a big part of our village.
Yeah, I guess if you look at the number or the impact it had, as you can see, this is the first year it had that major impact. So that's why the recommendation is moving forward, let's change that process.
Yeah, of course. I'm just wondering why it wasn't.
So we would have known about that $77 million increase in value back in August. Is that number fairly well known at that point?
Yes, I mean, we have that information, correct?
Okay, so then when we do the budget process,
Going forward, correct.
we will be, and I understand we won't know the exact taxing of the other taxing jurisdictions on there.
But that's out of our control.
Right, that's out of our
So
control.
at
We
the
can
October,
also-
right, at the October, if you do a budget workshop in October and you implement these changes to change the workbook so that the tax increment is in there, you will use that information in August to essentially put that into the tax increment. You can do an estimate just for the village portion of the tax increment worksheet, similar to what I had on here, where it was showing that kind of variance. And that then could be presented to you. And then when the actual sheet comes out in the third week in November, you can then do a final kind of check and balance. Vlad can do that to make sure then that the numbers are all matching what is being then submitted to, because you have to complete that before the mill rate worksheet can go out to the county to finalize the tax bills. And then the last step of it is just what Vlad did, when once those tax bills are created, you have to look at that tax bill and you compare it back to everything to make sure that it hit all the checks. If it doesn't, then you know you have an error, you have an issue.
So. Any other questions for Adam?
No, I may have some comments in terms of how to handle it, but I suppose that's where I'd rather hear from our taxpayers.
I guess as just a statement here, as I look at it, we have two things we need to deal with. This mess that we've got this year, we've got to correct that, and then we have to make sure this never happens again in the future. So we've got two different things. One we can likely resolve today. One's gonna take a little bit of digging and make sure, and vigilance to make sure that doesn't happen again, because I don't think
Well,
anybody.
once the work, if a new workbook
Right.
is created,
It'll
then it's there
account for that.
forever.
Right.
Just like we've been using
The same one, right?
the same one for however many years now that didn't incorporate that.
Right.
So obviously, we need to cut $330,000 out of our capital. So there were some options in here, but they were not all the options that we have. So we have $100,000 to set aside for the new inclusive playground. It was just going to start that fund. We have $95,000 for a dump truck that we can push back another year. I think it's 24 years old now. Okay. $75,000 for the demolition of the Public Works building next to the library. $70,000 for an IT update. $55,000 for the Woodland Trail engineering. And $15,000 for a chipping box. Now, does the chipping box, does that go onto the new dump truck that's in the CIP? Are those one and the same or separate?
I think they're the same. I think it goes on, it has to be fitted.
So, yeah.
Correct.
Are we gonna take comments from the community here? Because there's hands going up here. I'm just curious.
When we're done having our conversation.
Well, you said when Adam was speaking, we would have a chance to speak, so I wasn't sure if maybe got forgot.
No. So, and then the big ticket item is the $500,000 for the ice rink, which I personally would like to not touch. They have been working hard for a really long time. We finally got it into the budget. I would much rather come up with other funds that I mentioned.
So you mentioned dump truck and shipping, which is 110 grand, 75 for the demo of the Public Works, so that's 185, right? Playground is another 100, so that's 285, right?
Mhm.
Okay, did you mention the trail improvements?
Yep, $55,000 for the engineering.
Okay, And then IT update,
Yep, 70,000.
okay.
I did not put on this list the 10,000 for the server update, for, the office, because I think it's a small amount of money and it's desperately needed.
Mhm. So now it's 330, not 408.
Mhm.
Correct.
Excuse me. This gentleman asked a question and your response to that was no. Does that mean no, we're not gonna comment? We're commenting later? Or is now
We're
the time?
still having our conversation as the
Well, I
committee,
know, but
and
you're
then,
trying to solve the issue. We may have some ideas about that. I know, they're trying to find the money. I can hear that.
so I would like to proceed, with our conversation.
I want to comment on option 5, which is to sell the admin office, the admin building, which is fine, but I'd also like to sell the property that the current Parks building is on. That's
that
not
is-
until
that is not a-
2026.
Guarantee, though, that we would be able to sell
Mhm.
that property, so I'm leery of,
Right, but I think it should be out of the SIP
You're saying
26 and sell.
For the admin building, we wouldn't, for 25, we can't say that we're gonna be out of the building. Is that what you're saying for that one?
well, or that we could guarantee that we would sell it. I think that's a little iffy. I think we're much smarter to cut out of the SIP, push off projects, have that conversation next year,
Yeah.
when we start the budget in spring again.
I don't disagree. I just wanted it on the table that in addition to selling that, we should sell the property that the current Parks building is on.
And then we also have some other property you were talking about today, Julie, that when we're talking about that, we should put that out there as well.
Yeah, I mean, we have property on Northwoods that the housing committee has been discussing. We've talked about it before and kind of said we don't want to do anything with it until we get those recommendations from the housing committee, but those are properties that could be sold as well for development.
Do we have to make a motion on this now, or what's the procedure? I really don't feel comfortable making a motion on this until we hear from the folks that have.
That's fine. Do we have consensus then that our best option to fix this situation is cutting the money out of our budget for next year?
I agree with that. I also, one thing I don't like about how these options are laid out is that if we pick option, we want to do option 2 and option 4, because we need to correct this moving forward, so I don't think that it's pick one of these.
It's not, it's
Yeah.
multiple things that you can consider,
So I
right?
think that we do 2 in there moving forward, and I do think the 4 is our best option. But I also would think we should get some.
Bear in mind, no one in the audience knows what option 2 or option 4 is.
So option 2 is to change the budget policy moving forward to make sure that we don't have this happen again. And option 4 is to reduce the budget for next year out of capital improvements.
Right, for those who would like,
The hands all raised.
can you state your name?
My name is Richard Burris. I'm Mr. Bay, 224 Maple Drive. I totally agree with this gentleman back here that, we're here at this meeting. First of all, it's information finding. And that's what we were told we would have an opportunity to discuss. And then you moved on to an action item, which I think is way out of bounds. This group here, as taxpayers, may come up with several different ideas. So for you to ask the board, I believe is inappropriate, but that's either here or there. I also feel that it was inappropriate, not for this group here to have the handout that was given to the board members. That was very unusual, and I felt it would be helpful to move along.
Let me just note
That-
that we just got the handout.
And it would have been great if there was a stack.
I agree.
It was on the screen.
So I've got a couple questions about the TIFs. When did they mature?
One is 2028, one's 2038.
28 and 38.
We need one double check that on Adam, but I'm pretty sure.
No, that's right.
Mhm.
So they're set up for 20 years.
Yes, mix, yeah.
And when you pass a budget, Denise, in the past, you know, the board voted to pass a budget that they believed. And as you said, you've been here forever. We appreciate that.
I don't know that you do today.
But you passed this budget, and Julia, has she ever come back and said, well, we passed the budget at 421, but it's actually 444 with the TIF districts? Do you ever remember conversations like that, or? did
Not
that
with
stop?
Julie, because Tasha
But
was,
Tasha or whomever.
No.
You don't remember the conversation. So
no,
the question I have to Adam is, Adam, after the board passes a budget
Mhm.
that nails the number, then this TIF district floats and there's additional monies. Who is authorized then to sign that drop dead number for the village?
So that is submitted by the finance director. So when your operational levy is approved, so in this instance, what's always been done is the operational levy was presented, that was approved. That levy then is taken by the finance director, put into the tax increment worksheet, which then creates the additional tax levy that needs to be created for the TIFs. That creates a finalized levy that includes the operations plus the TID. That then goes into the mill rate worksheet that then is submitted to the county, that then finalizes the process. And so they go back and you have to submit to the county a copy of the notice, plus then all of your sheets. And that then goes in to create the finalized bill.
So the new number then does not have to go back to the board for approval. It's just an accumulation of monies owed by the TIF districts. And he has the authority to do that, or you have the authority to do that on behalf of the village.
So there are some, so municipalities do it different ways, I guess I would put it. There are some that will just do what has been done in the past, and they don't consider the finalize. There are others that essentially will now show what they anticipate the finalized rate to be.
Okay,
So they do, there's different, as kind of Denise alluded to, there's different methods to the madness, however you want to present it. It depends on what the direction is of the municipality.
so in this particular case, we didn't bring it back to the board, but you sent it on to the county, knowing that, when did you know that number? And did you make any attempt to pass that number on to the board or to the administration here?
When we found out, essentially, when the bills were finalized and we checked on everything to verify the numbers, that's automatically when Vlad saw it, I saw it, and that's when we communicated right away to Julie and who sent it out to the board.
That's also the day you stopped by, that's the day Denise called, and we had all been talking about it already, we needed to do something, so. What was that, Thursday, Wednesday?
Wednesday.
So that was the first time that you knew of the actual number, because you knew that the TIF hadn't been added to the approved number. When the board sat here and approved that number of 4 whatever, you recognized that that wouldn't be the actual number.
I wasn't aware of that, how that was computing into the finalized process. So that's where, when we had the meeting on the 21st and it was approved, we then waited for all of the forms to become available. I then worked with Vlad, that was submitted, and then when it was confirmed by the county, and said, yep, this is everything that's finalized. That's when we discovered that that was the issue, and now that's on the tax bill.
And they matched from there,
And they matched from their end.
like everything's matching, good to go.
Okay, I'll let somebody else speak at this point.
yes, sir.
My wife is Paula. And I'm Roger Oakdale. We live in the Crow's Nest. Her father built the tech center a long time ago. And I've had relatives up here since the 40s. It sounds like the village of Sister Bay has come to a Jesus place, just like the national government has. And the one thing that is clear to everybody in the whole country is that they don't want to spend money that they don't have. And I would say that is also true for us who are taxed in Sister Bay. Can you tell me what is the rough order of magnitude for the shortfall? Because I heard a lot of weeds and I got lost. But what is the shortfall in the budget?
So when the numbers are computed in our two TIF districts, the money that is generated from those TIF districts must stay in the TIF district. And the village can only spend those funds on certain projects in the TIF district. It does not go into our general fund or our general operating
You
fund.
know, I don't want to get into the weeds because it's very complicated. You guys have to wrestle with that. And I appreciate that. Now, what I want to find out is what is the rough order of magnitude of the shortfall? Just the rough.
The dollar,
$330,000.
$330,000.
Now, a lot of the projects, because I've been watching, are projects for, I'm leading up to an option, the next option, option number 6. A lot of the projects are for the tourists that come here, like that extra parking lot that you guys been talking about. The extra sewer facilities next required just for 3 months in the summer, probably for 4 months. So it would be my advice is to stop some of those projects or delay them because they're for tourists. The tourists do nothing but get in my way in the summer. I have to wait for 3 hours to get a table at Al's. That doesn't help me at all. So that's part of it. The other part of it is there's a huge room tax that goes to this outfit that does marketing. Do we really need more marketing for Door County? And it's a huge tax. I don't know what the procedure is, but I think you ought to find a way to recover some of that room tax to pay for some of the improvements that the tourists are gonna get.
It's actually happening.
Pardon?
It's actually happening that way.
It is
It is
happening.
happening that way. Yeah, read over it. I mean, not to cover this mistake, but it's happening in other areas. Yeah.
Well, let it happen more. That's.
Yeah,
It's a
You can read all about it too.
It's a huge. Anyway, that's what one of your residents suggests.
Thank you, Mr. Oakdale. Yes, sir.
Thank you. Ray Pelrine, Martha Luber Pelrine, my wife, on Little Sister Road in the village. She left a moment ago because she had another meeting. I really appreciate the discussion that all of you had to explain how this came about. A concern that I had as soon as I learned about the increase really had little to do with the how we got there, or as this gentleman was expressing it, the weeds. Because Nate, just to take a little issue with the way you characterized it before, a 12% increase in the levy from one year to the next, that would have concerned me no matter how we got there. And that's what is one of the reasons that I'm here is, I think many of us concerned citizens and even folks elected in local government, we oftentimes get confused when we're focusing so much on mill rates, which a mill rate is really just a factor to be used to arrive at what the real number is, and that is the bottom line levy for the payment of taxes for the coming year. And when I look over the memo that we got from Julie to the committee, giving some of the numbers that we've heard already, and I don't want to add more confusion by going over numbers again, but there are two numbers that stand out to me, and that was the levy for last year, including the TID, and the proposed levy for this year, including the TID. And that's, for last year, that levy was $3,762,000 and some change. And then for this year, it's $4,212,000 and some change. That's nearly a 12% increase. With increased values that we've had in the past couple of years, which we're all aware of, whether they're real values or just assessed paper values, it's still gone up in a huge way. And in theory, even whether you account for the TID or not, it should be reflected in assessments for people. It somehow wasn't. And again, I don't want to get bogged down in the explanation for how we got here, because it's great to know how we got here, but it still leaves, for me in my mind, a bottom line of a proposed 12% increase from one year to the next, which, as Dick, I think, was able to tease out from you, even you on the board weren't really aware necessarily until maybe the last week or so. And that really concerns me, that somehow we could get to that by focusing on, I don't know what, but I don't like the 12%. I'm hoping you fix that. And I appreciate, Denise, that you were laying out what seems like a reasonable way of fixing it. So I'm not here to suggest my idiot from the gallery's version of, here's what I think you should do to fix it. But my continuing concern is this, that you go from one year to the next with a nearly 12% increase, and nobody's really aware of it until about the time the bills go out. Thank you for allowing me to do that.
Thank you. Anyone? Sally?
I guess my concern too is we were here for the capital improvement meeting and all that. We also were told, I believe, that the bonding for some of these buildings we're building hasn't kicked in yet. So there's gonna be an increase in our taxes when that kicks in, am I right?
It will all depend upon the entire budget, when we bond for it, when we know what other operational expenses we have. Pretty steady, and anything else in the capital improvement plan. To say that there won't be an increase, I probably can't say that, because everything is going up, as we all know, all the time, but how much? And that's something that finance will have to deal with and make a recommendation to the village board. We cut hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars out of our proposed budget, trying to keep it at a 0% rate. Very hard. It was the directive I get as finance to every committee that worked through their budget, that after what had happened in the double whammy that kind of hit last year, that we felt that we should toe that line at a 0% increase. There can't guarantee, yes, we hear you, Ken.
But just to be clear, bonding is borrowing,
Yes,
and it's money that has to be paid back.
yes,
So we know that's coming,
yes,
in addition to whatever the TID money requires. The
yes.
TID district requires. Okay.
But how much of an increase? I don't know. Would it be a 1% increase because of that? Would it be a 3%? It just all depends on everything else that's going on,
And
and
that's what's, you have three things to factor in then. roughly.
Yeah.
So that's what scares me.
But those are included into that operational mill rate that we set. We look at what money we're gonna owe, and that's
yeah,
why.
but that's just, we evened out our debt service over that last packet from
Right.
maybe the September meeting, and we had it even previous to that. We had it even last year when Tasha was still here. Showing that the debt service was going to stay steady as we continued to borrow. But that's only debt service. That doesn't include anything else. And that if something were to come up it can still go up.
It can, I guess my point was, when you look at that operational levy and that mill rate that everybody expected, that included the debt service in
Yes.
there. So it's not like, oh, they borrowed and now is that gonna push it up? What we do is we include that in that, the budget that we heard in October. So it's not like that has anything to do with what we're looking at today, really.
No, no,
Because that's all
just the
capital
future.
projects.
Right.
Denise, that you have to understand, and please understand that in conversations that I've had with people here about this, that's the tough part that we're not understanding. You know, we are a village inside of Liberty Grove that is currently about 2 mills higher than Liberty Grove. We have, we receive in our premier resort tax and in our monies from the hotel tax, about $1.5 million a year, if that's correct. I was on finance with Caius Fletcher, and he used to say, if we're not careful, we're soon gonna be spending $1 million a year. He said it every year. Well, we're spending way more than the villages and towns around us, it seems, and yet you're slashing, by your own message, hundreds of thousands of dollars. And I think in a presentation that I heard Adam make some time ago about the debt service, that, you know, that debt service was based on, I think you said 3.5% to 4% of annual increase, growth, et cetera. And I'm just not seeing where we can maintain that type of growth. There are hardly any properties in this municipality that doesn't have something on them unless we expand our property. So it's just boggling to people that I talk to about the money we do spend. And you're saying, well, we're slashing it, we're cutting it, and yet there's significant more than any municipality. So, and right alongside your proposed, you know, today's posting for this down in the post office was the 15% increase for the sewer and water rates, or the fixed sewer rate, and the news that they're probably coming again in 2 years. So the village people are being hit with this, and they don't understand it. So it's not the same language, is all I'm saying. And I have to disagree with Mr. Pelrick. I think we do offer up, and we are here to say, is there another option? Quite frankly, I would propose and favor not trying to collect this money back. I would propose moving forward, but I would propose major cuts to our outlays coming up in the future. And I would look seriously at several of the projects we have online, say, can we get out of them? Our broadband doesn't seem to be what it was cut up to be. I would suggest we try to jettison out of that contract. I would suggest that we consider the Lagerquist property as saleable, and moving the building, the administration building into town. Or a number of things that I think could be done. It would minimize our costs going forward.
Yes,
Mike Glasswoods again. I want to add on to what my friends and neighbors are saying here. Adam, we talked about this in a meeting earlier. Debt expense as a percentage of our budget is rising significantly. It has been in the 25 budget, it was up again. And that debt expense comes from really a huge appetite by this board to build new infrastructure. We've got $20 million of projects being considered. Those projects are going to have a substantial increase in cost to them. They're buildings that are much larger. They're going to have to be maintained. I'm not saying that we shouldn't be making improvements, but we have existing buildings we could be renovating. We have buildings that are existing that we could buy. There are more efficient ways to do this. But yet we're buying property and building buildings to the tune of multiple millions of dollars. We're building a garage for $4 million. We're going to build an administrative building that will cost us at the end of the day $4 to $5 million when you consider the cost of the Lagerquist property. We have an agenda item out there for housing development. We're talking about a post office. I mean, the list of these projects is not realistic for a community of our size. We'd all like to see improvements, but these improvements have a cost, and it's not just the cost of capital. You guys get paid by helping us to get a good bond rating, and you get paid when we borrow money. That's great, and you're doing a good job of helping us maintain a good bond rating. But when we borrow that money, the taxpayers here have to foot that bill. And it's going up and up and up. And while the board's talking a good game here today, they haven't been acting that way throughout the last 2 years. And that's not your issue, that's our issue with the board, that's the voters' issue. And we have to take some corrective action. And I appreciate your explanation, but again, it's an explanation. This error should have been caught earlier. The board, to their credit, made it very clear to the staff, no property tax increases. There was no distinction between an operational mill rate and your words finalized mill rate. That wasn't mentioned once. It was how much our property tax is gonna go up for people. And Nate and Denise and everybody on this board said flat. And it's not flat. And that's unacceptable, and that's what we're frustrated with. Thank you.
Most of my questions have been,
Name, address.
Ken Church, 2295 Hill Road, Sister Bay,
Thank you.
Wisconsin, 54234. Most of my questions have been answered, and I agree with a lot of the comments. The biggest ticket item that you're thinking of scratching, that you don't want to see scratched, is the ice rink fund. Have you considered asking the other municipalities for help in this fund, being that it shouldn't just be for Sister Bay, it's for all Northern Door, basically. And I think most Northern Door communities are using it. So why not ask them to foot some of the bill when you're talking to such a big ticket item?
The Friends Committee, that is, something that they will be doing, and they will be going around to other communities and asking and pitching. But because they have always said that they would do that, we have not engaged in specific conversations with our neighbors.
Sorry, before you commit that we're gonna spend $500,000.
Well, the only way that we commit it is if they raise all the other money. If they don't raise the other money, we don't expend the 500.
What is that dollar amount that you're talking? Or what they're gonna raise?
You have to raise at least $500,000, probably close to $1.5 million.
Oh, they have to raise and then you're gonna donate the 5? Okay.
And
Yeah,
they
work with the community foundation to do that. They've just entered into an arrangement with them.
yes, sir.
Skip Idler, 2630 Woodland Drive in Sister Bay. I've got a couple of questions and a few comments. Adam, when the documents first came out, you showed a cost of 408,000, and now we're down to 330, 421. Where did that difference come from? I may not have heard it if you talked about it.
Yeah, so that was when I was at the Lee conference, I was trying to do it on the back of the napkin, I didn't have access to actually some of the files, so that was an estimate. And when I was able to actually put into the sheets and see where it came out, that's where I was able to hone in on its 300.
Okay, so that it's an accurate revised number. It's
Yes.
Cutting something out.
Correct.
And we heard the comments that Washington Allen spent 10 grand to rerun the tax bills. What is the cost involved for the village if they have to process refunds? I mean, sending out checks and all that isn't cheap either. So I think that's something that, should be considered as the finance committee and the board work into that further. Going back on what Louise said and what we heard before, last year's TID impact of 49 cents is not that far off of 51. So it wasn't something that was just minor in the past. It got overlooked last year. And then the comment side, most of my financial experience has been either running my own business or working with a 501c6 nonprofit as a board member and treasurer. A group run by volunteers, but we did have paid staff and a CEO, not far off of what the structure is here, where we had to rely on consultants as well. Within that group, the CEO worked with a philosophy and I don't like the term, but you call it a culture of failure that existed. That was defined as allowing a managed level of failure to exist with the opportunity for employees to grow as a means of learning. This did not include the allowance of the same failure to happen twice, which is what it really looks like here. As a committee, this village board, how you choose to move forward and the scrutiny of those who elected you will mean a lot. Does this include a deep look at, where the responsibility lies, what can be done to prevent this, which we've already talked about in many ways? And are there underlying motives that led to this, either intentional or not? I think these are things that need to look into. Kind of the bottom line is restoring trust is hard. Admitting here, which you did right away, is a good first step. Taking visible correction to those that are responsible, certainly part of that. But building that trust takes a long time, and I'm really concerned that this board they're kind of failed in that way, not just the board, but staff and everybody involved. So I caution you and look forward to seeing how you do that to rebuild the trust of the village.
Thank you. Anyone else? Oh,
Andy Warple.
Yes.
10771 on Facebook Drive. I think it's been sort of mentioned by a few people, right, but Lois said, we reached out to the Department of Revenue, I believe, which is awesome. Is there any other state agencies that we've engaged because of these issues, or if we look at things that may have in the past and how we can make sure we're heading the right direction forward? Any other state agencies that we could potentially, reach out to make sure that we do have all the right information, right plan in place?
Well, I can say that Adam has spent time reaching out to other municipalities to see how they handle it. I know Sturgeon Bay, I think, is the one where they're following the same process we do. However, they report back at the end of the year what that rate has been. They don't go back and change anything. There's just an understanding it might change. So, aside from the Department of Revenue, they are the big one that we work with on budgeting. So the other part is just networking with other communities and say, hey, how do you do your budget and how is it processed and what do you do with your TIDs?
The other recommendation I would consider would be for Vlad as the finance director to become part of what's called the Wisconsin Government Finance Officers Association.
Okay.
And so they have a conference essentially that meets quarterly, and they go over a lot of updates. So their December conference normally is they talk about accounting. So if there are changes that, again, that are newer processes, they actually have the ability to go to those conferences and trainings and kind of learn like, okay, here are changes that are going to occur in the mill rate worksheet or are going to occur in some of the processes that Vlad primarily would handle. So that's one that I would definitely encourage.
Have you had any experience with like the
Yes.
legislative audit bureau or anyone like that due to the discrepancy in some of the numbers that we've seen earlier today?
So I've had some contact with them when I was the city manager in Platteville. So that's something that, continuing to look into this, I'm gonna reach out. So the League of Wisconsin Municipalities is, the government affairs director is Tony Hecker, and I know her pretty well. So that was one I was gonna reach out to see if there were any other municipalities that, again, we work with a lot, but there's tons out there. So it's always good to kind of continually look into that network. Yes.
Yes, Mr. Oakdale.
I read somewhere that the census is now 1,100 people and something in Sister Bay.
1,210.
1205.
1,205, beg your pardon, 1,205, sir.
Is it reasonable to have $20 million on the books for 1,200 people? You might think about that. I don't think that's reasonable. In fact, if you divide that number correctly, it's pretty big for each person.
Some of that is not on your tax bill though, that $20 million. what, whatever was in the CIP for the marina building, the marina pays for that on its own. That is not included. And anything that pertains to, the sewer and water utility, if you are hooked up to that, you pay a bill for that. So that is also not included, in your tax bill.
But is it calculated in the TID? For the marina?
Is the marina calculated in the TID?
Should
I don't think
Not
so.
part of the profit.
Might check that.
It doesn't generate any tax. So it wouldn't impact it.
For that valuation though.
It's valuation.
Yes, Chad.
Jack and I go 23 and Kentucky Drive. Understanding a little bit about TIDS, knowing that this is now developed into such a huge problem, and not to defend you guys at all, but obviously it went a lot of years without a lot of development happening. And now, last couple of years, we've seen this. It should have been called last year. That's a big difference. Shouldn't our incentives within the village spending these millions of dollars be spent in the TID districts? Shouldn't we be figuring out a way to put an administration building within the TID district, since that's not gonna generate any revenue? We can spend that money in that district. That district is causing a shortfall for the rest of the community because of the TID. Wouldn't that be prudent? Or am I missing something?
So, awesome. The problem is that part of the TIF law is you cannot use tax increment for governmental or administrative buildings. So that's why. Everybody would love it, but no.
Well, I mean, maybe somebody could build it privately and we could lease it. There's the dodge. So anyway, just think a little differently.
Right.
And now you know it's a big deal. You gotta make decisions based on it. Means bigger cuts have to happen in other areas because that money has to go there, which we may not see benefits from for years, or maybe we will. But it's gonna have, it already has a huge negative effect on the budget process, and it's only gonna get bigger. So you guys gotta really think about the strategy going forward. I don't have answers for you, but I definitely know that there's a lot of freaking questions, and you need to be guided by somebody that's thinking about it. That's the most important thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
You guys are listening to us, correct? Because I get the feeling you're a different group than us taxpayers, but maybe that's not true, but you guys.
You know, we pay taxes too, though, Mr. Oakdale.
What?
We pay taxes too.
Okay.
Is there a map of the TID district?
They can call the office. and make this.
It's not easily available online.
Yeah, I looked.
You know, there are two, the easiest way to find it, because I'm having looked for it myself. There's a couple of sketches on it that in an article that the Pulse wrote a few different times, but. You know, the best thing to do is to go to the office, but we should publish it, you're right, but it's downtown and then it's out on 57. You know, on both sides of 57, just a little bit up the hill.
I'll send it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And also, I
Yes.
might say that, I'm not sure if I'm sorry, John, one sec. This presentation from Baird is available on our website, is that correct? Where?
Under meetings and agendas, it's part of where the packets are for the village meetings, it's right there.
Okay, not the easiest thing to navigate to, but if you go to the village website, you click on meetings and agendas and you scroll to finance, today's date, and click on packets, that'll be in there.
It's over to the right-hand side.
Additional documents.
Additional documents, yeah.
Yes, John.
John McMurray, 10638 Forest Lane, Sister Bay. Do we have any information on other communities that have skating rinks, municipal skating rinks?
Yeah.
I made some calls a little while ago. Winnetka, Illinois, one of the wealthiest communities in the state of Illinois. They have their own, but they have their own public power utility. De Pere is 28,000 or 30,000 people. They have their own skating rink. It's only available for 6 months of the year. Their annual budget was $232,000. I think that comes out to $32,000 a month. And I don't know how that's broken down, but compared to some of the other towns that have skating rinks, we're probably would be at the small end of the scale. The question is, can we afford that? I think it'd be a great idea to have it, but without a financial commitment from the villages, the other villages around who might benefit from that. The Friends program, I'm not sure is really a good idea. I don't see it's feasible for a community this size. And it'd be an easy thing to cut at this point. Years ago, people used to volunteer and literally flood the ranks themselves, or community members. Maybe that's the idea. Maybe we need to get a community movement going again to do that when it's possible, rather than spend a fortune on it.
We flood it now, John.
Yeah.
We just wanna do coils because with climate change, we just can't get it to stay frozen. But we flood now, he's actually gonna start flooding, I think, tonight. Well, but, thanks, John.
Okay, if there's nothing else, we're gonna bring the conversation back to the committee to make a recommendation to the village board, and my understanding is that we will have to have an emergency village board meeting either tomorrow or Thursday.
Right, or Friday morning.
Or Friday morning.
So I have a question about one of the options, and that is if we were to give refunds. So what tax amount would show up on as the last year, 2024 tax on my tax bill? Would it be what's there now, or would it be, because that's what I paid, right? But I'm gonna get a refund. I guess I am, because my tax went up, right?
Right.
So now 25 rolls around, I get my new tax bill for 25, and it's gonna reflect 24 actual and what the new 25 rate will be, right? Okay. What will last year show? Will it show what I paid, or will it show what I paid less my refund?
No, it'll show what originally was paid.
All right, so that's always gonna be the base,
Correct.
no matter what.
Well, as far, I mean, essentially, if the decision is to reduce the budget to 473.
I got you, but it's,
Then,
that's,
but on the tax bill, it will show the 524, because that's what truly was put on the tax bill, unless you reissue a tax bill.
which
Which
sounds like would be
I would, right.
doubtful, yeah, okay. I just wanted to clarify, I assume that was the case, just wanted to, okay.
So. What are your wishes now?
Well, I don't know, I mean, I can
heard from the public.
I get, you know what, I mean, I kind of see what. I see what Dick's point is. But, my big caveat would be that, I wouldn't, there's no way that I would wanna stick with a 10.8% increase across the board with it for everybody, unless I knew that for sure we could cut some of the future projects we have in the SIP, and we aren't making that decision tonight. So I'm not comfortable doing that, because we're a finance committee, we're not the board. We have 4 board members that aren't here, 3 board members that aren't here. So if we sit here and say, well, okay, we're not gonna do anything, and we're gonna cut the future ones, we go to a board meeting, and that we don't have consensus, we don't have the votes, and the SIP for 26 stays the same, then we lied again. So
we're not worried about what the SIP is for 26 tonight.
no, but I mean, I'm responding to Dick's comment, which is, if we were to not give refunds, right, not give refunds, and just leave it where it is, but think about what we're thinking about for the future and make some significant changes there. I think that's palatable. But since we can't make those decisions tonight, it's not even on the agenda, understandably, and we need the full board to make those decisions anyway. That's hard, you know, so that's,
I think you're saying it's a promise we don't have the power to keep. We can't say that.
No, we can't. No, we have-
Still give a recommendation.
well, we have three members who aren't here and, you know, and it's just not that kind of a meeting where we're gonna place that. You know, I have no problem making these cuts,
So-
none at all. The 300 and what did we come up with, some odd $1,000, none at all. Mm-mm.
So are the three of us in agreement that we want to refund? There's some mechanism on here for this 330,241 $.
Yeah, the one thing that we don't know is how much is it gonna cost? It doesn't sound like it's feasible to be able to, rerun the tax bill. It sounds, first of all, you know, exorbitant and not cost efficient, at least to somebody's, I think it was Skip that asked, like, what's it gonna cost internally for us to be able to process this? I don't know. I don't know how many, would we say we have 16 grand already paid? I don't know how many people that is. But those are the people that would get the refunds. What do we do with the people that haven't paid yet?
Can we make the recommendation to the board and then in that time have a better understanding of the mechanisms we can use? Is that advisable to do? Does that make sense?
Do you mean the mechanism as far as how a refund is processed?
Yes, to say how we're gonna issue checks.
If we can get answers from the county and the DOR, yeah. We're kind of reliant on other people for that, those answers, but we'll continue to try.
So we would be making a recommendation to the board, then the board has got to make the decision.
Yeah, you're just making a recommendation to the board. There's an emergency board meeting, and then before Friday, or before the end of business Friday, you have to allow us time to get numbers to DOR though. But the board is one who self make decisions. They're the ones who adopt the budget.
Yeah, okay, well, just a few.
The person at the county, that's treasurer, that's who we have to get a hold of? Okay. And who do we have to call for the Department of Revenue?
I might have to reach out to Andrea.
I also understand, Dick's point. But I, as a trustee, made a promise, said it over and over and over again. And I like people to think that I am a person of my word. And when this happened, I was not a person of my word. I'm trying to make good on that so that there is trust in when I tell you something that I mean it. And that's why I think I'm in favor of cutting the refund checks. Because that is what we said we were going to do. And there may be a lot of decisions throughout the years or on any given agenda where somebody may not like the decision that I've made or the way that I have voted. But at least you know that where I'm coming from, what I stand for, and certainly as chair of finance, that's important to me. And I think it's important to all of us,
Yes.
but I'm only speaking for myself. So.
I told Ken last year, and Ken is a proxy for the rest of the village. Yes, I do agree with you, Denise.
And I promised to be nice tonight, and I think I have been.
That's because I took the brunt of it at work.
Meeting's now over yet, Ken.
So it would seem that if we have to issue 1,200, and that's on the high side, maybe, refunds. And it costs $5 each, which is probably on the low side, I don't know, that's $6 grand, right? per
I'll write
person.
the checks for $6,000. I
Thank
got
you.
nothing to do, I'm retired.
But I mean, I'm just talking administrative,
1,200
right?
Oh,
So what do you have materials, you have time, and you have stamps. Anything else go into that? Okay, it's gonna cost about $6,000 or $7,000 to do it, it sounds like, and maybe it's less than that, I don't know, but that's what it's gonna cost. Right?
I think that's something where we would obviously assist with that so that the staff doesn't
That
have
would be
to.
really good.
Yes,
So,
that would be my
So
intention, would
it's
be to
free.
assist with that.
to us. Thank you, I'm kidding, but it's,
No.
so it's gonna be now.
I'm not so sure that's entirely inappropriate to ask.
No, my intention would be to assist with figuring out that process, absolutely.
Okay. So we have that, so there's not a lot there, that's good. So what's on the table is a demo, not demoing the public works building, not doing the IT update, not doing the playground update, not doing the trail improvements. And that is coming to, I believe,
The dump truck.
the dump truck, I'm sorry, and then the chipper, correct?
The first three that I think make sense would be demoing the public works building, the playground and trail improvements.
I thought we have to do all of it.
Well, I'm just saying, well, that's, I'm starting there. We can-
410,000.
Oh. So
That's not all the way there, but
Three,
How do you,
so three
What do
thirty,
you think
four
about those
ten,
three?
we gotta get rid of that, okay. So then I'd get rid of trail improvements and
what I just said is the demoing, trail
public
improvements,
works, yeah,
and then the playground.
yeah.
Just starting there, and then we can keep going.
You touched
I
part of the
think
ice
we
rink.
pushed the dump truck.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you said.
You touch part of the ice rink without taking it all, take 100 out of there.
You wanna take 100 out of Dallas, right?
We really don't even know if it's gonna happen, honestly.
It doesn't sound like anybody has any confidence it will. I for one think it will, but you know, I completely understand that the moment credibility is not exactly available. So
If we do the playground, the dump truck, the demo and the trail engineering, we leave the IT update in there. And the chicken, but that's 325,000.
okay.
Oh, and then, so then the chipping box, because it goes with the dump truck, so that's
Yeah.
340,000. The only thing that we leave in there is the IT update.
And the ice rink.
So that would be, I will make that motion to recommend to the village
I
board
think that
that we pull that out of the CIP.
Dave, your opinion on the ice rink and taking something out of the ice rink. You and I have an opinion, I just think we should talk about
So. As much as this is about us keeping our word, this is also about the village keeping its word, and if we just told Miles in the last meeting that, no, go get funding. We've got this, and asking, well, what are you waiting for? Is there something more you need from us? We've committed to this. I have a big reservation on that. I wonder if we could defer some of this to 2026 on the payment, because are they gonna get it done in 25? I don't know. But what we've told them right now is that we're gonna give you $500,000 in 25. Granted, we were making decisions on some incomplete information. But I think if we can stick with that, I still think we should.
Again. We told them, go ahead, it's a done deal.
We did, but my next question is, I know we have to have an emergency meeting, the emergency meeting would simply be, the only agenda item would be this, right?
Yeah.
Right, okay, and then can we facilitate a meeting to talk again about SIP? The SIP, not just for 25,
That would be, you're
I
saying
think
about-
next year we would do that.
we do that in January.
No, we do it more towards fall.
I would like to also do a further SIP discussion next month is finance.
You have to get through those department budgets to see what they're putting in the SIP, to discuss the SIP. What do you keep, what do you not allow?
I still think that we
I
could,
think we can
No,
still
that's the question.
start early, Julie, because when I was talking about all the cuts that we took out of the current budget that we pushed out. Now we're pushing this out. We need to reorganize what's there.
We also need to look at the roads that we put off and said we will look at when we look at the stuff again.
So I think we can start that conversation in January or February and just reanalyze what we've pushed, reprioritize, and start over.
Is there some kind of law about when you can officially redo a SIP?
We can do it at any time.
Not that I'm aware of,
Okay,
but.
I just wanted to know, okay.
So if you would recommend to the board that they amend the SIP for this, it would be, and the budget accordingly. Because that's really what we need to amend.
Can you say that one more time?
So the motion was to amend the SIP,
The 2020 for 2020, well, the SIP in general, but that would be.
the 2025 SIP,
Yeah,
and the budget accordingly, because it's really the budget that is causing the issue.
okay.
So what's gonna have to happen is essentially you're reducing, in the capital improvement plan, you now are reducing the 1.1 million that was essentially put in as capital project levy.
Yeah.
In the budget, what's gonna happen is you're going to do a budget amendment to reduce that amount. And then essentially reduce the expenditures, and then you're gonna add in an expenditure in your general fund that now will be the 334 reimbursement payments.
Yeah.
And that's essentially your budget amendment.
So anybody that's not at this meeting, we should, because we had discussed preparing a press release, but I know we had to talk about this, but that's,
Well, I'll second that motion you want to table that.
oh, sorry.
Okay. Is there any further discussion on that motion?
No, not for me.
All those in favor respond with an aye. Aye. Carried. Okay. So,
Let's discuss when. We can-
well, there's only three of us here, so.
There's four, go.
Right, but if we at least know we have your three, then we can work on getting what dates work for you three, then we can start asking the other board members.
We said Thursday or, you said Thursday or Friday, right?
So if there's,
Wednesday evening, as long as you had 24-hour notice, Thursday or Friday. Friday morning, so
This building is not available Thursday.
the Thursday evening is out, unless you can somewhere else or do it virtual.
I'm gonna have to do that. So,
I can,
well, and it probably should just be a virtual meeting.
okay,
So then it doesn't matter if this building is available.
Right. I just need 24 hours to post notice.
is there a time?
I can do Thursday from noon on, and then anytime Friday morning.
Well, I think we need to do, because we invited other board members to come, and they did not. So I don't think that we can probably have it any earlier than 5:30. Right?
Yeah.
Just to make sure everybody can get here.
5:30 Thursday evening, or we're gonna do Friday morning. Thursday evening's better for you.
I think Thursday is better for everybody.
Fine, that's fine.
I mean, staff to get the information and
No
to
problem.
deal
I
with it.
I also wonder, I think that there was an event going on at Gibraltar
This
today,
evening.
this evening, to kind of put an issue on that. I mean, let's give them some latitude and say anytime after, whatever works for you guys on Thursday night, or Thursday afternoon.
Yeah.
The sooner we can get this for staff, the better off we are. I don't know if that's
Right.
4 o'clock instead of 5:30.
Anytime from whatever, Thursday afternoon, okay.
That would be fine too. Anytime on Thursday, as long as it's zipped.
Yeah, and that, I put the caveat afternoon, not available to me.
And so what, what will our press release say? We have many people who do not live here. They have a second home here, they pay taxes. they get their mail, their tax bill is sent someplace else. They have no idea what's going on, that we met, that we're changing things. Obviously, I don't think we're gonna be able to reach everybody and inform them. So if the board does decide to make the decision that we do refunds after the first of the year, a letter will also have to be written stating what's going on, what happened, why you're receiving this.
Inserted with the letter, inserted with the refund.
Inserted with the refund.
Uh-huh. Yep. So the press release, I think, should just state, you know, what happened and what the, what, I guess the board, because it'd be a board decision, right? What the decision was to correct the error. Or whatever you want to call it, but yeah. This is a situation, this is the remedy, this is what the trustees decided would be the best solution.
I do think that a letter should be sent to people as soon as the board meets. And I know it's extra postage because it's gonna take a while to do those refunds. That way people get the letter right away and they know, hey, hold off. Actually, no, because they're gonna pay the amount on the tax bill.
So you might not be making some of those refunds until August, if people wait until July to pay their second half taxes.
No,
So you're gonna refund money that they haven't even paid yet, if they only pay the first half by January
do that.
1st?
What if they don't pay the second half?
We'll be paying refunds for the next how many months, right?
No, you could, I mean, essentially as a Jerry, you could refund the entire amount. You're just
Without
gonna have,
them having paid it,
you're gonna have to wait then.
which ties into the next discussion on the agenda item. Or the
The
next
past due
discussion.
taxes, but that aside. Is that prudent that we do that? Is that it?
We're gonna have to look at the pros and cons of
Yeah.
that.
That's gonna be one of the conversations that Vlad is gonna wanna have with the auditors, because that would be the question.
I would want to make that decision without some, good counsel.
Well,
I presume
then it
you're gonna
may
be there
not
with
be-
Vlad on that conversation to make sure.
if that ends up being the case, then it will dribble in. So it
Yeah.
won't be this huge.
No, it's gonna be a huge amount at one time.
At
no,
one
But
time.
ultimately, it's whatever it's
Right.
gonna cost us to process it, that's
Right.
what it's gonna be. Okay. So we can ask our auditors that?
As far as if you can issue a check.
Well, what is the best course of
Yeah.
action?
Yep.
Give it to them now and pray they all pay, or if they don't, what what a mess, okay.
And what if they sell and you pro rating and all that other good stuff?
There's
So
that.
there's,
Yeah.
this is.
That's true.
Conversations beyond.
Okay. All right.
So when this comes to the board, you'll have
Will
those
we that
recommendations
information by
somewhere.
Thursday evening when we have a meeting? Yeah. You think we'd have good advice from an auditor by Thursday evening?
We can try, that's all we can do is try, I mean, they were here yesterday, they sometimes are very difficult to get a hold of. So all we can do is try and see what we get.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dave.
Thank you.
Sorry I let you down.
Okay. So we're gonna, the TBD on when the meeting will be, and then Julie, you're gonna take a stab at a draft PR press release.
Yeah, I mean, if it's going in the tax bill, I wouldn't say it's really a press release, but a letter to the taxpayer.
But I was asking, do we wanna do a press release to the Pulse? I mean, are we gonna do something like that?
I mean,
or no?
that was Deb, wasn't it? I haven't seen her in
That was
years,
Deb.
so
She's been emailing and following.
Yeah, she's gonna write a- yeah, she'll write
she will write a story, but I also think that there should be something. And maybe you should talk to her, Julie, about if she's going to be writing a story. That if you have questions, call somebody, or we need to also have it on front and center on the village's website. I mean, we shouldn't have to scroll for big news like this.
Please put stuff like this on the news and notices. And then after a while, when they're no longer valid, we pull them down. I mean, I don't know where else you put news and notices.
That's because our website still sucks, but it should. We should have a spot when something is really, really important, that when that web page loads, it is the first thing that you see.
Well, what we do on the really important things, we do put it on the ticker that's going across the top.
It's very small.
And then we do the news and notice. And then we do a press release. And then we do the email blast to all those that I have an email for. So we'll do that. I'll work with Deb and then I'll also,
Yeah, she won't, I don't know if she'll have time to put it in this week's post, but definitely next week. I don't know when they go to, what's today?
I'm shooting Deb an email now, just saying. hey, let me-
might have time to
let me-
get it.
I'd like to talk to you before you send something.
Before the story goes out, okay.
All right, next agenda item, delinquent taxes. So we have so the best that I could tell by looking up on the county's website is we have Matthew Pigeon, who is unit 213 in the Country Walk Shops. We have Mark Cowan, unit 208 in the Country Walk Shops.
That's Birchwood Lodge, that address.
Oh, Birchwood Lodge?
Yeah.
That's not the building that it showed on the GIS.
10571 State Highway 57 is Birchwood Lodge.
Oh, so these are all Birchwood. Yeah, because the building that was highlighted, it's not Birchwood. It was,
Because Country Walk isn't on, isn't on 57.
I guess I didn't even look at that. I was looking at the building that was highlighted and it was Pastavino.
They might have the same fire number, but different street name.
Okay.
All right, Birchwood Lodge. Thank you for clarification. Then we have Sue Pollock on South Highland. We have the Johnson brothers, Sidney Sawyer and Spencer on North Highland. And we have the Sunrise Building LLC.
That's a tenant in their building, not a
Tenant.
Yeah.
Behind the pig, or behind, the bowl.
Bowl.
Okay. Yeah. So this totals $858.64. Do we treat them all differently, or do we just lump them together and write it off? I don't know, what have we done in the past?
I am against writing anything off.
Okay,
We, as a principal thing,
but is it gonna cost us more money to take legal action?
it's a
than we're
principal
owed?
thing.
I know, but is it gonna?
Why should somebody who hasn't paid be able to not pay it when everybody else has paid theirs?
Okay, so, but again, if it's gonna cost us more money to take legal action than it is, than they owe, then,
There is another option to just continue to accrue those interest and penalties for years and years and years until the property transfers. Hope that they sell it through a title company, because when they ask for a letter of special assessment, I report to them, this is how much they owe in back taxes.
because there's a lien on it, they can't sell it, right?
Well, they can sell it, they just have to then satisfy the.
That's what I mean,
tax.
yes, yeah, sorry. Mhm.
But
That's fine.
I mean,
is that
publishing
the
a list of
direction you
names.
want, just to keep tracking it, even though that tax no longer exists? Personal property tax, ended
Yeah.
this year.
Yeah, I'm good with that.
my recommendation was an article in the paper showing delinquent taxpayers in Sister Bay, but a little harsh. I mean, they. used to
Well,
do
and I
that
think
years
that
ago.
that's also, for the 11 other properties that have not paid their taxes, resulting in $47,000.
That's property tax, that's a lot. That's not personal. you know?
Right.
That's
I
significant.
think an ad in the paper for all of it, and the dollar amounts is fine.
Yeah.
Treat them the same.
Yeah,
Put an ad in
absolutely,
the paper.
absolutely.
With the name and the dollar amount, name, address, dollar amount?
We should put something, make it, I mean, it is official from us, but let's put something official on there. We can just put a text delinquent notice or whatever. I know that the Pulse will put whatever you want in those, as far as a header. Or whatever you're putting in the paper.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to do it like in a block ad, I think is the
Yeah.
best way. That's how they used to do it. Costs us money, but it gets attention. You know, if you do the block ad like they did years ago with the delinquent taxpayers in the back.
Maybe at not the next finance meeting, but a couple from now or whatever, if we could see some kind of results and see if anything worked.
I don't know, I mean, so maybe the $47,000 is important to see if there's results of the other.
Yeah, I don't-
agree with you,
the other one's
Denise.
okay. But the
So not-
47 grand, that would be
Right, you
nice.
just let it ride then,
Yeah.
instead of wiping it off, just let it ride.
Yep.
Sooner or later it will sell.
I have a hard time spending money for it, but that is really cost me, so.
Right. Okay, municipal reimbursements fund. So pertaining to these funds, Julie, do they have to be spent on specific things?
Tourism related.
Tourism related, so they cannot go into the general fund, right? Okay, that, I just needed, I thought that's what it was, but
Yeah.
I needed to clarify that.
Can we take their $51,000 and put it towards the playground?
So Parks talked about moving forward with the restroom addition. At least having that lateral
Yeah,
put in.
I think that's.
So I think that's very
It
important
is
to
important.
utilize these monies for an unbudgeted thing that
Yeah,
came
Nate,
up.
I agree with Denise on that.
But if we just took that money out of the playground, if we can replace some of it,
Right,
But
let me get there. And then also the landscaping along Mill Road, which was about $5,000. Okay, for the landscaping. What was the lateral, Julie?
We're just guessing right now, we don't know, what, 5,000, 5 to
Okay.
10?
And so then, how about, and then we talked about, starting to plant more trees. So if we have almost $52,000.
I don't think I do the crosswalks.
No, no, those are the only two that I'm willing to throw money at this time.
Yeah.
Crosswalks, no. Donor plaque, no. The lateral, the landscaping, and then if we could put, let's say $15,000 into, a tree budget. And then the balance could go.
Can I just
See,
comment
the
on
only
that?
concern that I have by putting the balance back into, the inclusive playground
Yeah.
is that project is not gonna happen for a long, long
It's
time
gonna take
now.
way more than.
I mean, that's we're talking about $500,000.
so can we take this $51,000, allocate it towards the ice rink? And then take the money we're gonna allocate towards the ice rink and put that in the general?
Yeah, but we need these two things done.
I think
We
we
just-
leave agenda item A the way we decided. Rather than revisit. I don't think it's fair to revisit it with all the people gone.
Exactly, yeah, that needs,
So
I
let-
agree, we just. Had consensus.
And I
on it
would
before
say
we're gonna
this-
Take it to the
I
board.
would say this to Nate, we all want that playground. I think putting a little bit in every year makes it kind of first of all, an accounting budgeting nightmare.
So no, I moved
That
on from the
limits-
playground, I understand
Okay.
that. Then I'm saying, okay, well. We just heard the public tell us that we're spending a lot of money, and do we really need to do all these projects, and then we're coming up with projects to spend this $51,000. Where if we can take this $51,000, allocate that towards the ice rink. Reduce our contribution from from the undesignated funds by $51,000, can't we effectively put that $51,000 back in the general fund if we allocate that towards the ice rink? Which seems like it's a pretty easy argument to say that's for tourism. Is that possible?
But you can put all the 50,
And this is for the sake of reducing the, our contribution for the ice rink?
I'm just saying that we could spend $51,000 less money and get it in the general fund, and then I'm sure we'd find something else to spend on rather than picking out items that we want to do to spend $51,000.
well, these were projects that the Parks Committee has approved or talked about that were unbudgeted. That's why these are listed here. So, you know, and there might be other things, but that's why I had listed these, and of course, there may be other things, but the lateral Mill Road landscaping, the trees, I mean, let's face it, we don't even know if we're gonna get a grant on that concession stand. You know, after Parks Committee had met and talked about it, Jeff came back and said, hey, we don't have the volunteers that we thought we did, so
Oh. Okay.
maybe you just leave it as it covers the lateral Mill Road landscaping, and any unspent money goes to a tree planting. And these other projects, I can get a hold of the woman who was gonna give us the bid on the crosswalks and tell her forget it, and donor plaque.
That can wait. I mean,
Yeah, except for this has been a long time, this thing's been waiting to see her, it's hurting contributions.
Well, we can do one plaque. We just don't have to come up with a wall design at this point in time.
Yeah. Okay, so maybe it goes for a donor plaque.
No, I meant hers. If she's been waiting for it.
Where are you gonna put it though? That's a Parks Committee discussion, I think, but, you know, maybe the money goes towards that as well. Lateral without a doubt. Can't pass that opportunity up. It'll cost more money in the long run.
mhm. Yeah. So that leaves us with 36,000. If the ladder was gonna be, sorry, the ladder was $5,000, I'm sorry. That leaves us with roughly 40. Let's see, yeah, 46,000.
Well, and if you do the landscaping along Mill Road, that leaves us with 41.8, give or take. I say we create the tree budget. We keep talking about it, we don't do it. Because it always gets cut,
It was cut this year.
yes.
Yeah, I'm good with that. How much was landscaping along the
The
mill?
one thing you can get me
Under
with,
5,000. What?
the one thing you get me with, I can't vote against trees.
All right, so that's 10 between the lateral and Mill Road, right? We had 51, that leaves us with 41, and then 41 starts the tree, fund. What I'm saying?
And that's gonna pass muster for things we can spend it on.
Yeah, so every year you designate what you're spending those on, so, it would be. The motion would be for the lateral to the concession stand, the Mill Road West landscaping, and the remainder of it is to be put into a tree budget.
But this money has to be for tourism, right?
Yeah.
And I'm asking if the tree budget will pass muster for that.
Well, 'cause
Oh,
it's a
that
park.
one, I see what you're saying, yeah, I think so, cause we talked about it by parks along the community garden. There's
Okay.
more in the park or a waterfront, I think we'd probably plant two if we had one.
Okay.
Is there a motion?
Do we need a motion? Okay, I move that $51,814.18 be allocated as follows. For the lateral, near the concession stand in the sports complex. To establish a tree fund and for landscaping along Mill Road,
Mill Road West.
Mill Road West.
Motion by Housen,
Second.
second by Bell, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Carried.
And now you're gonna see that again in March, so start thinking, because that's when the next time it'll come out, that we'll have that.
By March.
It comes out in March, and then usually we do it at the next available finance meeting. It's usually done around June. This year, we didn't have the treasurer, we didn't have the numbers, and then when Vlad came, it was very recently when we're going through the budget, we're like, hey, here's the municipal reimbursement funds, they haven't been allocated yet, we need to get those allocated in 24.
Oh, so that's why they're larger, because they accrued for 2 quarters?
No, no, this is what we got in March was 51,000,
Oh.
whatever.
Oh,
It's just that
we get it all in March.
You get it all
Oh,
in March,
got it.
yep, and then we have to allocate it.
Okay.
So this next one was just an update on the bus, where we're at. We're closing this grant out. We are having a little challenges getting the DOT portion of it, but I think we're gonna be able to take care of that. The only other outstanding thing was we need to collect 175 on a graphic. Other than that, yep, other than that, this CMAQ grant will all be closed out and we'll be done with it.
Hallelujah. I'm surprised that you're having that trouble. So it's from the, it's not from the feds, it's from the state?
Well, what happened is it was federal money passed down to the
Yep,
state,
remember.
and then when I went to get the reimbursement, they're like, well, you had to buy you had to buy that bus within 2 years of the grant award, and it's been more than 2 years. Because remember, the price was changing.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so because it wasn't purchased within the 2 years, they're like, we can't pay the money. And so, sorry,
Are we guaranteed that we're gonna get the money?
we're trying right now.
So wait a minute, when did the actual purchase was in 2020? This is 24, 2022?
I think the invoice was January of 24.
24
Yeah, we just.
this year?
Yeah, you
Okay,
and
but it
I,
was
we sat down
23.
there.
So I guess maybe I thought the purchase was in 23, but then the invoice was for 20.
And that grant award was before I ever came.
No, I know, but it was you had a long time I remember, we had a long time to do it.
Yeah, and they're saying 2 years, to actually purchase it within that 2 years. So anyways, we're working on it. I talked to the DOT, and then I talked to the Federal Highway Administration, who said I can find somebody at the DOT who can help with this. And then those people never followed up with me, so it's just one that now I don't hear back from them tomorrow. I'll follow up with them again, because we also ran into this issue on much smaller grant, which was the urban forestry grant. That grant reimbursement request only like $2,600, but that reimbursement request was supposed to be made by March 31st. And the person in front of that project didn't do that, so now I'm going back and they're like, well, I explained to them, I said, look, it's not the money, I don't want to ruin the relationship with the DNR, and so they're like, let me see what we can do, so they're trying to get us that $2,600 as well. So we can get those grants, both of those closed out and get the money.
Okay. Okay, we don't need a motion, right?
No, that was just an FYI
We
where
do
we're
need a
at.
motion to adjourn at 5:07.
So moved.
Motion by Housen,
Second.
second by Bell, all in favor? Aye. Carried.